Hi, everyone. Hi, I am Nicole Buchanan. I am with Ada Developers Academy. I am extremely excited to be here with you and this amazing panel of change makers. I'm going to have them all introduce themselves, and I will go from my left all the way across. We will start with Elizabeth.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. This has been such an incredible day. My name is Elizabeth Weingarten. I'm the director of the Global Gender Parity Initiative at New America, and I'm also a collaborator with Artemis. And the third thing that I'll mention, I wear a lot of hats. I'm an editor at a magazine called The Behavioral Scientist.
Brilliant. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for attending this session. I appreciate all of the engagement. My name is Kirk Mead. I'm a community collaborator, connector, and currently a free agent. So if you like what I'm saying.
Hello, my name is Amanda Townsend, and I am the HR program manager at Outreach.io, which is a sales software company based here in Seattle. We're also nationwide. I'm also the founder of Unlimited Coaching, which is a career and life coaching business that I founded 2 years ago, and I'm really excited to be here.
Okay, so are you ready to be liberated? We are going to end this day with a bang. Are you also ready to be exhausted? Because what we're going to talk about will make you feel liberated if you go down this path, but by no means will it not have you exhausted at the same time. So it's great work. It's purpose work. It's stuff that I absolutely love. And we're going to talk, I know all day you've been talking about, how do we provide access? Is diversity alive and well in our organizations? How do we get more women and people of color into the right seats? We talk a lot about a lot of things. And in this session, we really, really want to do less talking and provide you some action items that you can take back into your own environments and get busy and jiggy with. So, how many of you have children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, younger siblings? Okay. So, have you ever thought that their futures flow out of decisions that you make? Decisions that others make, whether those decisions are conscious or unconscious decisions? Because guess what? Their futures are made and do flow out of the decisions that folks make unconsciously or consciously. And so, folks, humans create futures, and futures, they don't just happen. And so we want to make sure that you understand that you're fighting every day for the futures of your kids, your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews, your siblings, and we want to tell you how to go about putting some actions into place to allow you to do that in a really effective way. So fighting for a future is really more internal than it is external. And so fighting is doing. It's not just knowing how to do something. It's really doing it. So I'm going to have Elizabeth talk to you a little bit from kind of a behavioral science perspective. She's going to tell us a little bit about, why is it, she's going to provide some insights, why, from her perspective, the dynamics that, changing systems within our workplace versus changing kind of traditional mindsets. Tell us a little bit about kind of the insights that you can bring to the table around that and kind of what that really means in this space.
Yeah, so I think the whole field of diversity, inclusion, equity has kind of become synonymous with unconscious bias training. Of course, we've seen recently a company that shall not be named recently did unconscious bias training for all of its employees. And that was like the very first response, right, to something that happened. Unfortunately, we know that unconscious bias training isn't really that effective. And in fact, it can have a significant negative backlash. And that happens in a lot of ways. That could be as simple as, a company thinking, well, we've invested this time and money in unconscious bias training. We've checked the box. We don't really need to do anything else. Or somebody attending an unconscious bias training. It's really interesting research into something called moral licensing. It's the same reason that you might have a salad for lunch and think, I can eat that brownie later. Well, guess what? You might think the same thing when it comes to, oh, I attended that unconscious bias training. I don't really have to monitor how I'm thinking about promotion on my team, because you kind of have that same type of framing in your mind. So that said, I think it's really, really important. I kind of work at this intersection between behavioral science and diversity, inclusion, and gender equality, because it's really hard to change mindsets, right? It's not that it's impossible, but it takes a really long time, and we don't have forever. And we also can't be there in every single circumstance in which somebody might be influencing how you think. So, if you're a manager, you might be able to control the message that somebody gets at work, but you might not be able to control what they're getting at home in their relationship or in their communities. So, what is it that we can change? Well, we can change systems and we can change processes to help people make better decisions. So what do I mean by that? Take the hiring process. There are all sorts of organizations that have cropped up to help people, kind of help protect people from the biases that might seep into that process. So there are companies that are helping you determine how the wording of your job listing might be unappealing to people from particular backgrounds. There are organizations that help you, help show you that actually unstructured interviews don't work, and here's how to actually structure an interview. There's all sorts of research that shows how the order in which you interview people and kind of who's in that interview pool influences who you end up choosing at the end of the day for that role. So there are all sorts of ways that you can kind of tweak the process, changing the questions that are asked, changing how you interview, changing performance evaluations, which I'll talk a little bit about later, to help people make better decisions. But to not necessarily say, hey, you person, make a better decision, but getting them there through kind of particular process or systematic kind of tweaks to the system.
Wow, that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So, Amanda, if you're thinking, as an HR and culture professional, what insights can you share that you think can help folks that are at a leadership level get comfortable with the fact that even though they may be well-intentioned, what we've seen many times is that they expect and they want diversity within their organization. I don't think I've met a CEO yet that have said, hey, I don't want diversity. I don't think it's a good idea. But I think what I have met is I've met a lot of CEOs that have said, hey, in my organization, I've kind of let meritocracy take over, and I've kind of said, okay, I put diversity on my mid-managers, and I've kind of let them run with that ball. And so we've kind of seen mid-management set up for DEI to die at the mid-management level. So what additional insights can you share with us around, from your perspective, with that kind of power structure and that kind of shift happening within organizations?
Sure. So like you said, executives do want diversity, and then they want equity and they want inclusion. But a lot of executives, not all, but most, don't have time to think about those things every day. They're thinking about the bottom line of the business, and that's first and foremost. And so a lot of the time, a lot of these programs and initiatives get pushed down to middle management. And so what I think is best is if the people on the ground level, people in entry level and mid positions, take it into their own hands and start creating programs, because we can't wait for leadership to do these things. We have to take it into our own hands. And so some of the things that we've been doing at Outreach, for example, and something that you guys can all do next week, even tomorrow, is invite people to just have a conversation about diversity and equity and inclusion. Either like invite them to lunch or have a big meeting in a conference room and just start the conversation if it's not already started at your company. And then see who shows up. And those will be your champions. Those will be your diversity and equity and inclusion champions. And from there, then you can start implementing programs and putting people into action. And another way that people can start implementing these programs is giving back to our communities. And one way that Outreach has been doing that is we decided to acknowledge MLK Day this year and going forward. And if your companies don't acknowledge that day, then ask why and fight for that, because it's a very important holiday to acknowledge if your company does acknowledge DEI as an important thing. So we have MLK Day as a day of service, and so this year was our first year doing that. And we had around, I would say 80% of our company nationwide giving back on that day. And now we also offer 2 paid volunteer days a year where employees can get together and give back. And so I feel like that's a really great way to promote inclusion and equity in the community. But yeah, just try to, go out there and, take these things into your own hands, and don't be afraid to speak up and create programs, because anyone can do it. It's not just a manager or an executive's responsibility. It's all of our responsibility. And the fact that you all are here today shows that you're taking initiative and that you can do that at your own companies too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is all of our problems. It's all of our opportunity to resolve. So yeah, I think this is great. So Kirk, I would say as a community advisor, as a manager with a great financial background, why is DEI not just a nice to have within an organization? Why is it just it's good for business, right? It's good for business. Why is it good for business?
I think first of all, just let's talk about what emerging markets look like, and let's talk about the demographic shifts in the country. We're not getting whiter, right? As a point of fact, there is a demographic shift happening in the country. Globally speaking, emerging markets are not markets that are what would be represented by dominant U.S. culture. The question then becomes is how do you create products and solutions for markets that you have no line of sight into? Internal to your organization, who there can answer the question about what needs to happen? If you're multinational, who can talk to you about what needs to happen in Cambodia? Well, who can talk to you about what needs to happen in Zimbabwe or Mozambique? Let's go south of the border. Mexico, Nicaragua, Brazil, right? Each one of your markets, if you're a multinational, needs to have some sort of line of sight into it. If you're talking about purely domestic workforce, you're talking about purely domestic products and solution selling. When we talk about the communities that you actually connect with, that you serve, how are those communities shaping and informing your product offering, right? When we do a survey of our company, do we speak about it in terms of de-siloing each one of those business units across business lines, talking very candidly and very explicitly about the challenges related to how we service our individual demographics and our individual clients? Do we talk very clearly about that? Do we own the language around it? I don't want to talk in the abstract. If the idea is to, in fact, service queer communities, are we comfortable saying queer communities? Are we comfortable saying Black or African American communities? Are we comfortable saying Latino communities? Do we have a position around equity? Have we talked explicitly and openly about that? When she talks about what is the impact to the bottom line, you have to think about this work as a work of imagination first, which is say, what does the future hold for my organization, right? Have we positioned ourselves strategically to be competitive 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? in a world that will not look the same as it does today. In this very room I sat a week ago and 2 weeks ago, and we talked about what the jobs of the future look like. And most jobs of the future that our children and our grandchildren, our nieces and nephews will hold do not exist, right? Do you have a sense of the pivot that your future labor forces need to make? Are you invested in building human capital in those emerging markets, in a domestic consumer base that can actually help drive the thinking around how we sell solutions, products, right, businesses going forward? Now, if you don't think that's valuable work, I have to ask you, are you worried about your company being in business in the next 10, 15, or 20 years? I mean, maybe you're not. Maybe you think your consumer base, your client base will be there, and they'll understand your value prop. Or maybe the clients that you've been marketing to for the last 15, 20 years are going to look very, very different. So how do you buffer against that? And therein lies something of the business case for why diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging internal to a company can help sort of inform business strategy and market understanding and line of sight into where our next product offering and our next innovation comes from.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Folks, we don't even understand, quite frankly, as Kirk says, you know, what jobs our kids and our grandkids will have in 15 years. We have no clue. Many of us here are in technology roles, and we have no idea what type of software, if they will be in a software related job, what that will look like. But what we do know is that our world is becoming more and more integrated, more and more diverse. And what we do know, and it's proven, is that diversity drives innovation, and that time and time again, it's proven, it's bottom lined out that diversity, it's shown that diversity drives innovation, and that when you have a diverse team, you get products and solutions out the door faster. And it is just better for your bottom line, right? You just do better as an organization. So I don't think there's any doubt right now on the table with respect to why having a diverse team is smart. I think there's a lot with respect to fair, and there's a lot with respect to just unconscious bias, quite frankly, that steps into the game when we're hiring. And so we have to make intentional and conscious efforts to get that out of the way. We have to take action. We have to not talk about it as much and just take action and get stuff done. So folks, what do you, on the panel, you know, are you all optimistic about the progress of diversity and inclusion? And actually, even more importantly, when folks and organizations are making steps toward diversity and inclusion, how about equity in America? Why or why not?
I am optimistic because there are events like this and people are showing up. I think that's great. And I think that we need to continue having these conversations. Something that I would like to see is more investment and more action from companies and from leadership at different companies, because, you know, like, it's, if you have diversity and inclusion as a company value, for an example, and it's just on the wall somewhere, but it doesn't really, you know, provide any results or change, then it's not worth it. And so somebody at the company needs to be a change maker who's really, you know, making some actionable steps towards this. And so I think that we have a lot of work to do collectively as a nation in this area. You know, Black and Latina women are still leaving the tech community in droves every day because they don't feel like part of the community and they don't feel like they're welcome. And people of color in general are not joining the tech community because they don't see themselves successful in that world. So we need to start, you know, you were talking about our youth, and that's a huge area that we need to focus on is, trying to empower and inspire our youth, especially our youth of color, to see themselves successful in the technology community. And I think once we can do that, we'll see a lot of change in the future.
I think I'm cautiously optimistic. My journalism background always makes me very skeptical. But I would say, one thing that to me is really, really important is, again, kind of baking all of these insights into your systems and processes so that your work is not contingent on a leader, right? Or, particular, leadership being interested in this right now, or even having budget for this right now. Because the thing that I worry about is, okay, our economy is doing pretty good right now, right? What happens in a recession? Well, the first thing that gets cut are already really, meager budgets for DEI. So how do you kind of anticipate that and make sure that you're doing things right now that lend themselves towards long-term sustainability of some of these actions?
I think, again, wonderful insights from everybody on the panel. I'd also like to add that I think what's been challenging for me as I've sort of surveyed the state of the conversation, diversity, equity, inclusion, is that people have a difficult time articulating the why. What is my individual incentive? What is my organizational incentive to do this work? And so while I think it's fair to express a level of cautious optimism around it, right, there doesn't seem to be a lot of clarity on why anyone's invested in it to date. And I don't want to end on a negative note. I simply want to say that there's an opportunity cost and there's an opportunity to be made, be taken advantage of. And we really need to get clear, and we need to develop a line of sight into why we're doing this work. Simon Sinek has a really fantastic book. I'm sure some of you have seen his TED Talk. Start with why. Right? What fundamentally informs this work? Is there a moral imperative? Is there a business case? Do we diversify client base, revenue streams? What is it? What is the thing? What is the tangible good, the tangible benefit that you can articulate that makes you want to show up for these things, but more importantly, makes you speak up in the boardroom? And lastly, I'd like to say that what we really need to do to move forward, and it's prescriptive, I suppose, but we need C-suite and director level championing of this work. Period, the end. It dies on the vine if we can't get CEOs, COOs to do the work. Salesforce's CEO, through, I believe, $3 million quarter over quarter, to resolve the issue of pay parity in that company. That was a tangible action you can take. Your CEOs have the latitude and the ability and the authority to do the work necessary to resolve some of the problems that we have in DE&I work, right? And simply, we have not done it. So the question is, why not? What are you waiting for? The right conditions? The right opportunity? What specifically is it that you need to make the change? And then do it. There is no obstacle there that you can't surmount. You started an organization. You started an entire business in a challenging market. This should be one of the easier things to fix.
So folks, bottom line is we don't want to confuse you. We're going to keep it really simple. We're going to work with the power of 3, right? It's really simple. Our human brains can only take so much. And so we want to keep it to kind of 3 action items. So I'm going to ask each panel member to give me 1 action item that you can leave here with that's tangible. So I'll start with Elizabeth.
So my 1 action item is take a look at your performance evaluations, because performance evaluations, we talk about kind of how people ascend into leadership positions. Performance evaluations are often the things that hold people back, particularly people from underrepresented groups. There's all sorts of research. If you're interested, I can talk to you afterwards about kind of all of the ways in which performance evaluations can disadvantage people, and kind of how to do that assessment, because I know we're running out of time. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm happy to be a resource for all of you on how to do that.
I think one of my action items would be, well, we talked a little bit about hiring, and I think that one issue in the tech community is, especially in startups, is that we like to hire people exactly like us. And I think that part of, that creates this homogenous, environment in the tech world. And I think if all of you can try to go and meet people who don't look like you and who didn't grow up the same way as you, and try to surround yourselves with people who are different, that will be a huge help, and refer those people to your companies, and try to help the pipeline diversify.
Thank you. In short, identify your champions for this work, period, the end. Whether it's at the board level, whether it's at the stakeholder and shareholder level, who are your champions? Who is going to drive this work from inception to execution and completion? If you don't know who those people are, there is no material investment, substantive investment in actually accomplishing this work. You've got to identify the people who are responsible for it. You've got to put resources behind it, or it doesn't happen.
So, folks, we are thrilled that you came today. We are so excited that you supported our panel. I'll leave you with just 3 really quick things. You are fighting for your futures. You're fighting for your children's and your grandchildren's futures. Doing is fighting. You're not fighting by knowing what to do. You've got to do it. And by no means is this going to be comfortable. But guess what? Comfort is overrated. Commitment is underrated. So doing is fighting, and you're not fighting by knowing what to do. You've got to do it. Wow. Thank you. Awesome.
Wow, that was amazing. I don't know if you could hear us clapping from back behind that curtain there. What a day. We just have a few minutes left together, and this probably won't surprise you, but I do want to hear from a couple of you. It's true. I want this to be a dialogue. You've been a part of so many incredible discussions and panels and conversations throughout the day. I want you to be thinking about, what action are you ready to commit to? What action will you leave here and truly do? So while you're thinking about that, I just want to shout out a few thank yous. First of all, thank you to all of you for your participation, for sharing your thoughts, for being brave, and for contributing to the conversation. I want to say thanks to our summit curator, Laura Youngkin, who is in the aisle here, who pulled all of this together. Thank you, Laura. And a huge thank you for Christy Johnson, who had the vision for the day, and all of Artemis Connection. Thank you so much. And of course, thanks to our sponsors, especially our platinum sponsors, Expedia Group and Microsoft. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now please take out a fresh piece of paper. One more fresh piece of paper. If you're looking for information after you leave here today, some resources, some support, if you'd like to learn more about any of the presenters or the individuals, I want to give you an email address. Are you ready? I want you to reach out to Artemis Connection at, here's the email address. I realized once I said at that was probably confusing. The email address is connect@artemisconnection.com. connect@artemisconnection.com. Great. You've got your paper out. And if we could have the slide, please. I'd love for you to write on your paper and fill in the blanks here. I am committing to an action by a deadline. I am committing to taking this action by this deadline. I'm going to give you just a few seconds to think about that. Great. And now I'd love for a few brave volunteers to share with us what you wrote. Laura has the mic. She'll come to you. Can I get a hand raised in the air? Who's willing to say out loud your commitment? Thank you so much. Can you say your name?
Yeah, this is Bobby. One of the facts that was shared is that women are 2 to 3 times more likely to be interrupted than men, and that we need to interrupt the interrupters. So I'm committing to interrupt the interrupter starting at our all-employee meeting that we have as a company tomorrow.
Wow. Thank you, Bobby.
Awesome, Bobby.
Fantastic. Who else is willing to share their commitment? I saw you writing. I know you've got incredible commitments. Yes.
Hi, wow, that's really loud. Sorry. Yeah. My name is Catherine. I'm actually a co-founder of the company that has the curriculum back there, and we have pretty good representation of women and people of color in our entrepreneurs, but it can be better. So I'm committing to having at least one entrepreneur of color in each one of our education modules by the end of the summer.
Excellent. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you for sharing that. One more person, share your commitment, please. Who's ready to do it? Yes, in the back. Thank you. The beautiful jacket. Oh, I'm sorry. This is great. We'll do 2 more, and then that's it.
My name is Michaela again.
Hi, Michaela.
I'm committing to asking for sponsorship by the end of the month
By the end of the month.
or next week. I don't know.
Okay, I was going to say,
Week works.
you're asking for sponsorship. Maybe you could do it a little sooner. Let's say by the end of next week.
All right, last one.
Ready? Okay.
I'm Mary Alice Colvin, and I'm committing to sponsoring 3 young women in the next 60 days.
Wow.
Thank you, Mary.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Thank you to everyone who shared. Thank you so much for being a part of this day. It was extraordinary. Please go out there, be brave, be courageous, take action. Thank you so much. Thank you.